So I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the role of design in media in general. Although my specialization's in film, I think we've learned a lot about storytelling that, combined with new technology, really applies to a lot of what probably everyone in this room does. This we call the mandala. It's representative of a new sort of workflow that's being developed. And there are films like Avatar, let's say, that made very good use of the idea of a non-linear, immersive, additive, feedback loop space. We can design to camera now in a very specific way in sets that are virtual and have yet to be built, and make all sorts of decisions, doing all of that kind of prototyping exploration in the early stages, but continuing to allow it to expand in this iterative, non-linear way. And that interplay and that collaboration should be feeding the entire design process all the way out to manufacturing. This is about story, but it works just as well for manufacturing surfboards, for example. So as an example, Minority Report sort of kicked this off for me. There was no script at the beginning of Minority Report. Steven Spielberg had a fairly good idea of the context of the story, but he hired Scott Frank, the writer, and myself on the same day. So we had to take the sort of set of rules that he gave us, a couple of paragraphs. It's a benign world, it's a green world, non-fossil fuel. It's driven by the idea of precogs that live at the center of DC that have a limited range, so people cluster in towards the city, and a vertical city develops. But this world developed in the absence of a script, and I think that's really significant. As this vertical architecture develops, we realized there'd be a need for a certain kind of transportation. And so we came up with the maglev car. We started this film with a group of scientists and engineers and architects and urban planners for a couple of days, and did this very deep research kind of think tank to talk about what the future would be. And then I hired a scientist from MIT Media Lab and brought him into the art department. And we started developing a kind of studio science that would support the storytelling. So in this case, the maglev car that clings to the side of buildings, which also evolved from doing animation prototyping in this design visualization space, which is ultimately translated into the real outcome, though, is that there was no script that defined a maglev chase in the movie. The fact that this exists in the film at all came from a very direct design initiative. How do you get to work, right? But if we'd relied on the script, it's unlikely that would have ever made it into the film. And just to come full circle, this gesture system that Tom Cruise used to investigate the visions that were going on in the precogs' heads was developed by John Underkoffler at MIT Media Lab as an extension of research that he had already been doing. And so in the film, he pitched it as a narrative device. Tom Cruise and Steven liked it, and we adopted it, and we built the hardware to represent how that would work. But a couple of years after that, he was asked to see if he could actually develop it for real. And now this system called G-Speak is a 60-person startup working for half a dozen corporations with systems moving into sort of aerospace and air traffic control and Wall Street and all sorts of things. So because you can move an enormous amount of data around in a short amount of time. What's interesting to me about it is that it's as close to anything I've seen, without pitching this as any particular system over any other, of a collaborative workspace that we could really dive into that is truly an immersive design space where you can interact with several people at the same time, you can manipulate 3D space. It represents a piece of fiction that had enough logic embedded in it, enough research, enough thought put into it, that it actually came real. And there's this very interesting interplay now between entertainment and science. There's such a great opportunity for cross-pollination between the two.